Hello and welcome. Today's video is a continuation of the previous video where I showed you how to begin your own sourdough starter. If you have not watched that video, I invite you to click on the description below, or it's going to be at the end of this video. There's going to be a link to it as well. So whether you already have your sourdough starter or you're new to sourdough bread, I'm going to show you the way I like to make a sourdough bread. We're going to start with half a cup of your starter or the starter that we began on the previous video. When making a sourdough bread, it's very common to use our hands for mixing it. So just ensure that you wash your hands and that they are clean. Next, we're going to add 1.5 cups of non-chlorinated water. Our sourdough starter has wild yeast and friendly bacteria, and we don't want to get rid of those. Next, 2 teaspoons of sea salt that doesn't have additives and it's not iodized. And we're going to give it a whisk. Now I am going to add 4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. I'll be using a spatula to begin the mixing process, but then I am going to switch to my hands. This can get a little sticky, so I suggest that you wet your hands lightly before you do this. I forgot to wet my hand this time, and as you can see, the dough is sticking to my fingers. You're going to continue mixing with your hand until all the flour is completely incorporated into the dough. Finally, you're going to cover it with either cling wrap or a plastic wrap, and I do this to prevent the dough from drying out, but you can also use a damp towel. Now we're going to let it rest for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's been about 45 minutes and I'm going to give it the first stretch. As you can see, this time I didn't forget to wet my hand. You're just gonna stretch and fold and stretch and fold all the way around. This is to make our dough stronger and build its structure. We're going to cover it again and let it rest for another 45 minutes to an hour. It's been about an hour and I am going to do the next stretch and fold. And again, my hand is wet. And as you can see, the dough is more stretchy, it has more structure, and it's stronger than it was before. Now we're going to use just a little bit of oil. I like to use olive oil, and I'm going to grease another vessel or another bowl. And now I am going to transfer my dough to this bowl to let it rise and double in size. I like to add just a little bit of olive oil very lightly with my hand on top of the dough. The reason I do that is because once I cover it with a plastic wrap and the dough rises during the fermentation process, it can stick to the plastic and I don't want that. Now I'm going to place this on a warm spot of my kitchen counter for about 8 to 12 hours, or you can leave it overnight. And in the meantime, I'm going to feed my sourdough starter. I'll be baking bread again tomorrow, but you can just put it in the refrigerator if you're just gonna take a week or 2 weeks to make bread again. To feed my starter, because I used half cup of this starter to make bread, I'm going to feed it again with half a cup of flour. This time I'm using rye flour. So half a cup of rye flour, but only a 1/4 cup of lukewarm non-chlorinated water. And now I am going to give it a good stir to incorporate as much oxygen as possible. And then I'm going to cover it and place it in a warm spot of my kitchen counter until it has fermented and doubled in size so I can bake bread again. Or you can place it in the refrigerator until you're ready to bake bread one more time. It's been about 8 hours and my dough is ready for the next step. I'll be preparing a cast iron Dutch oven, which is about 5 quarts, but you can also use a 6 quart. And I'm going to sprinkle it with just a little bit of oil all around it. And if you put too much, don't worry about it. Just use a paper towel to remove the excess. Now the next step is optional, but I'd like to share this tip with you. I like to add a little bit of cornmeal to the bottom of my Dutch oven. This is to isolate the dough from the intense heat of the cast iron. In our house, we like our bread not too dark at the bottom, but just slightly brown. Again, this is completely optional and it is not necessary for you to have a wonderful and delicious crusty sourdough bread. Our dough had been resting and rising. Now it comes the last step, which is proofing the dough and letting it rise a last time. Grab a little bit of flour and sprinkle it over your countertop. Once on the counter, we're going to give it a good stretch. And this is going to be the last stretch of this dough. Now fold it very simply, just as if you were folding clothes. We're going to tuck it into a ball and continue doing this for just a few minutes. We're trying to create some tension on the outside to make it smooth. You're doing this by tucking it and pulling it towards yourself. If at any point it becomes too sticky, dust your hands with flour very lightly, but do not add any extra flour to the dough. Now we're going to place it inside the Dutch oven, sprinkle it with just a little bit of flour, cover it, and place the Dutch oven in a warm spot of our kitchen for about 4 to 6 hours or until it has somehow doubled in size. The time depends greatly on how warm or cold is your kitchen area. Well, for me, it's been about 7 hours and I am ready to bake my bread. Before that, I'm going to give it one last sprinkle very lightly with just a little bit of flour. Now I'm going to score the bread. And for this, you don't have to use any fancy equipment. I'm using a loom, but you can use a knife, and I'm going to do it with both. The reason for scoring the bread is because when it is baking, the bread itself is just going to burst open, and we are just giving it a guide on how we want the bread to open. As you can see, I'm using a knife and I'm going to dust it with flour. When you score the bread, do it very softly or lightly. You don't want to push the bread down or deflate it. A simple score is sufficient, but I normally like to do a cross. After I score the bread, I'm going to place the lid on the Dutch oven and place the Dutch oven in the cold oven and then preheat it gradually. In the past, I used to preheat the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit and then place the bread in the Dutch oven and bake it. I have discovered that placing the dough in the cold oven and heating it gradually has the same result, and it's faster and my kitchen doesn't get extremely hot. Once I place it in the oven, I'm going to preheat my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. and bake it for a total of 55 minutes. 45 minutes of those are going to be covered, and the last 10 minutes I'm going to uncover the bread. Now it's been 45 minutes and these are the last 10 minutes remaining. I'm going to uncover it, remove the lid, and let it bake for additional 10 minutes. If your bread is too light for you, then you can leave it additional 5 to 10 more minutes depending on your liking. Now this is the way we like our sourdough bread in our house. Not too dark and not too hard. Finally, you need to let it cool down completely. The bread is going to continue cooking inside, and if you slice it a little too soon, it's going to be kind of gooey inside. Alright, our bread has cooled down and now the exciting moment comes. It's time to slice our bread and give it a taste. Our bread is amazing and delicious. And now stay with me until the end of the video. I am going to be giving you a few tips on how to maintain your sourdough bread fresh for several days. I do not suggest you store your sourdough bread in the refrigerator because it can get really dry and tough. One of the places that I used to store my leftover sourdough bread is in the microwave. I keep it there all night long and as long as we are not eating it. Another option is to place it in the cold oven. I like to place it on top of one of the oven racks. And same as before, you can keep it there all night long or as long as you're not eating it. Now, after a few days, the sourdough bread can get a little bit dry. And this is the perfect opportunity to make a delicious breakfast toast. Simply cut a slice and then cut it in half. Now we're going to place it in the toaster. I like to turn the knob all the way almost to the highest setting. It always depends on the model of the toaster that you have. And now we are going to wait for that delicious toast to pop up and be ready. It has a nice light brown color and it's very crispy to the touch. And I like to add some butter to it. And now for the fun part, let's taste it. It is crunchy and delicious. I'll be posting more videos of all the wonderful things that you can make with your sourdough starter. So stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you are notified when I post a new video. And I hope that you have enjoyed this sourdough journey with me. Don't forget to click on the video on how to begin your own sourdough starter, which is right here at the end of this screen. Have a wonderful and very blessed day. See you soon.